This may or may not be a shock to you, but we actually converted our hotel room into a podcast video.
Oh, brilliant!
And
Did you?
we'd love to actually have you.
Oh yeah, come in, absolutely.
Really,
Yeah,
you'd have 20 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can make that happen.
Checking the mic, 1, 2, 3, 1. Emarc is on. What? Emarc is on. Who? Tell your friends, tell your dog, tell your mom. Tell what? Emarc is on. Oh, hey mom. Emarc is on.
You guys are freaking awesome, and I am gonna take less than 30 seconds to tell you why. And I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna get emotional, but I am gonna be very serious and let you know what's happening in this part known as a heart in here. So when we first started this podcast, when we first started this vlog, you guys, it was just something fun we wanted to do because we thought it'd be awesome. But now that we're seeing so many of you are engaging with it, so many of you are watching it and listening to it, I can't explain to you how that makes me feel, because to know that we're having fun at what we're doing and we're adding value to other people, I mean, that is the best feeling ever. So like I said, I'm gonna hold back these tears, but I do wanna let you know how much it means to us that you're supporting us with your time. Second thing, if you're new to the Emarc and Emarc show, definitely watch the first video of how we got Gary Vaynerchuk on our podcast. Guys, it is freaking awesome! Emarc, what are we talking about today?
Well, since the first video that we put out there of us getting Gary V, the number one question we've gotten is, how did you start this podcast? Where did this come from? Where did you get the equipment? Really, what did that whole process look like? So that's what we want to share with you today. So it really started a few weeks before we went to New York. We're talking about the trip and said, why don't we start a podcast while we're there? Why don't we just do this? There's going to be all these speakers. Gary V is going to be there. We've been sending him these things, as you saw in that video. Our ask to him should be to be on our podcast. So let's start one. So we got with Nagle, our audio video guru, and said, what would it take for us to start a podcast? And he said, well, I'm not sure completely right now. Let me go back, do some research, come back to you. And to be honest, I'm expecting he's gonna say it's gonna be like 10 grand. It's gonna be super expensive to get all the equipment to get this going, because that's what I had heard out there. I think that's what most people think, is that it is extremely expensive. But the fact of the matter is,
it only costs $20,000. I mean, not 10 grand.
What?
It only
you didn't tell me that. Oh no, it only cost really a couple $100. I mean, the mics you're listening to this on right now, or a couple $100, maybe $100 mics. It is not super expensive. Really, on a small budget, you can get the equipment you need, and maybe at some point Nagle will put together a little pack or some tips on what to look for good quality, inexpensive equipment. So we got all this equipment together. Joey ordered it. We did some tests the couple days before we went to New York, but then we packed it all up, went to New York, and we just started recording, right?
Exactly, like right in the middle of the street.
Yep.
That was it.
No, so we went to actually Long Island before, and if you know where New York is, Long Island is like way over here, like really far away from New York City. And we had a lot of equipment, a lot of clothes, a lot of those packets, those little packets you saw, we actually brought a couple thousand of those in addition to all this equipment. So we had 7 big suitcases that we were lugging around.
People.
Thankfully, I have a third hand, just it's hidden, to carry around the extra suitcase. No, none of us have a third hand, so we're all just kind of lugging around these suitcases, trying to figure out how to get them there. First thing we had to do was take them on the subway. And if you've ever taken a New York subway, there's not a lot of extra space on there. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of space for people, let alone people with 2 to 3 suitcases a person.
Yeah. And not just regular suitcases. Like, I wish you could see how massive these things were, because again,
we'll throw a photo of them
somewhere
and show you how large they were. But we're taking the subway. We get to Union Station, Union Station, the big train station there. We get off. We get in the elevator, and Emarc, what happened in that elevator?
Well, if you guys have ever met me in person, I'm a very talkative, friendly person, right? I just like to acknowledge the people around me, have a conversation with them. So, hey, I'm in an elevator. There's a guy in there. I thought I'd say hi to him. That was a mistake.
Yeah, what did he say?
Stop harassing me. I'm like, okay, I am not in Kansas anymore. Guys, I live in a town called Freeport, Illinois, 26,000 people. Definitely not in the scale of New York.
Nope. So that was our first experience, but we didn't let that get us down. We just got off the elevator, walked out of Union Square to go to Times Square, which was like 2 miles. I don't know. It felt like 7 miles because remember, we had 7 suitcases to lug, plowing through people. Like, excuse me, don't worry about us. I think we probably looked homeless walking down the street with all of these suitcases. So then with our 7 suitcases, we walk into the fancy Sheraton, check in, go up to our room, and then go back down to where the convention is and start asking around, where can we do this podcast? We brought all this equipment, not having any idea where to actually do the podcast, because you kind of need a quiet space to make a podcast work. And the event organizers told us, sorry, we're using all of our space. You can go rent one from the hotel maybe, which come to find out they had nothing to rent to us. So we start thinking, where are we going to do this podcast? We head back up to our room. We're chilling on the bed, or were we sitting? We sitting or chilling?
I think we're doing none of the above. We're laying down.
Oh,
I don't think we're chilling or sitting.
We were laying down on the bed.
Because again, we had just walked like 2 miles.
We were dead laying on the bed, looking around, and Nagle says, well, what if we just did the podcast here? And he starts talking, there's a table over there, I can move that here. You can use the beds as your chairs. We can put the guest over here and sit him there. And there's a TV behind it. You could put a logo up there. And at that point, I'm like, what? We don't have a logo.
Yeah. No logo.
No logo, but okay, let's make this work. Let's pick up the table, move it over there, design a logo, and by now it's like 1 a.m. And mind you, the conference starts at like 7 a.m. And Emarc has to go run out because we had to call every single Walgreens to find the one Walgreens that sold an HDMI cable and had it in stock. So he goes out, gets back at like 2, 3 in the morning. We hook it up, test everything. The software didn't work because, well, that's what software does. So Joey stays up another 2 hours to fix the software and buy different software. And then we're finally here at 6 a.m. ready to go down to the conference, everything's set up. Have no idea who our first guest is gonna be. Start listening to the speakers. First one speaks, which is Ryan Dice. We're like, okay, he's a really big name. Probably don't go after him for our first speaker. He's probably not gonna be on our podcast. Maybe not our first. Then Jason Swank, another big name speaker, is the second speaker. We listened to him speak. Seemed like a really cool guy. We said, all right, let's ask him to be on our podcast. So he gets done speaking. He's wandering around. We find him in the convention center, and Emarc walks up to him, and what do you say to him?
Hi, I'm Black. Will you be on my podcast?
And he said
not,
yes.
Not exactly that. So I go up to this guy, and mind you, while he was talking on the stage, I got the chance to ask him a question. So I was hoping you'd kind of remember my face. So he's like, oh, you're the guy that asked me that question. I'm like, yes, I did. Thank you for, you had a great response. So I'm like, hey, I have another question to ask. Have you been on a podcast? And he's like, of course I've been on a podcast. And I'm like, we have a podcast. Would you mind being on it? Now at this point, I'm sure he's thinking, maybe 2 weeks later, we'll call him, invite him on our podcast. That's probably what he was thinking. But I'm like, would you be on our podcast today? And he's like, oh, sure.
Where?
In our hotel room. So he kind of took a step back. At this point, though, he couldn't say no because he already said yes to being on the podcast. So, long story short, the friend he was talking to, he gave him our hotel room number and said, if I'm not back in like 30 minutes, send everything.
Yep.
Send the infantry.
Then we escorted Jason up to our hotel room with us, sat him down in front of the chair. He saw our nice little camera pointed right at him. At this point, he's probably still thinking there's a 10-20% chance I'm gonna get murdered. But went on with it anyways. Started recording, and Nagle's gonna show you a little bit about how that went. Definitely check out that first podcast and see how we got all the other guests on there as well.
Said, let's start a podcast while we're at it. Why not? So these are our first 4 guests. Will you be number 5? Yes!
as you guys just saw, we were able to convince speakers at this conference to be on our podcast. And you guys, let me just say this. We wanted this to happen from the beginning, but we weren't sure if it was gonna happen. Now, as you saw, we had cameras, we had podcast equipment, but we didn't have a room. We had a room, we didn't have speakers to come into the room and do a podcast. So all that to say, we had certain aspects of what you're seeing now, the Emarc and Emarc brand, the podcast, the vlogs. We had some aspects of all these things set up, but we didn't have everything. So instead of like getting down on ourselves, getting kind of sad, depressed, whatever, because, we had this goal in mind and it was going to take so much to bring it to fruition. Therefore, let's just not start. No, you guys just start where you are, and I promise you, your passion will find a way to make whatever you want come to fruition. Like, we wanted this so bad that we went to New York with half the things that we needed, and then we figured out the other half.
Yeah, because if you wait till everything is perfect to start, you're just never gonna start. You're never going to get there. So what's your goal? Big or small? Let us know in the comments, and let us know what's holding you back. What are you struggling with to be able to reach that goal?
Yeah, bye.